meeting. This evening we're going to have some singers from Scotts Mills entertain you with a song called This Winter Tide, and we are accompanied by Mrs. Voss, and I'm Karen Almquist.
Join me for the flag salute, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have a few items on our consent agenda tonight. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll move for approval. Second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda passes. And I would just like to comment on G on our letter G on our consent agenda, the resignation of Dale Koger. I would like to thank Dale for his many, many years of service and dedication to this district. He's done an awesome job for us, ladies. Thank you, Dale. Student reps, William and Kylie.
Hello.
If you guys could turn the mic on, it's kind of a big room, so.
All right,
Perfect.
just slide it to the right. All right, before we begin, Kylene and I would like to thank all of the board members for all the time and effort you guys spend working in our Silver Falls School District. Our high school as well as the rest of our community school appreciate everything you do to make our lives better. And on behalf of Silverton ASB, we all kind of got you some gifts behind you. And yeah,
Yeah, on the
we
way.
hope that you
Here's your welcome. Yes, thank you so much, you guys. So I am going to start off with clubs. FBLA. FBLA has regional skills competition for Rhiannon Meter. They are working on getting their booklets done by March 1st for state. February 11th through 15th is FBLA week, and they are working on getting everything prepared for that. ASB. ASB is working on getting the community events starting in schools. We are just bringing in the new year, and we are working on Queen of Hearts, and that will be at February 22nd, and it will be a blast by decorating and getting everything set. Spring Week is getting organized at the moment and getting all of our ideas in. FFA meeting was on last Tuesday, January 8th at 6:30. Some students have been working on their CDE leadership projects. Ag Show is coming up, and that is at Northwest Portland. Thespians Drama Club. Children's Theater is now in the middle of tours, and they're doing this for 3 weeks. They show about a dozen schools. Some they travel to, and some students come to Silverton High. Frog Prince had auditions last week, and the cast has been presented. Monday has rehearsal. January 24th at 7 o'clock. Everyone is welcome and free with no charge. This is a senior project for Josh Anderson, and the money will be split within Frothy Fox and the club. Key Club, preparing for fundraising for the district convention. Krispy Kreme fundraiser they are working on, and taking on a fashion show. Speech and debate. On January 11th, they have a contest. They went to Pacific University, and many students was very successful. Some were Houston Winslow, semifinal in junior impromptu. Jonathan Sisley got 4th place in junior impromptu. Savannah Sweet, sorry, 6th place in open radio and semifinal in open prose. Rebecca Illisoy, semifinal in open prose. Ethan Elliott got 1st in open humorous. All clubs have been working and getting everything organized, and we'll be back with clubs again.
All right. First of all, I like to reflect on the boys' football team once again. And recently, the football team was rewarded for their efforts with 11 All-State OSAA 5A honors. In addition, Coach Mannion received the title of All-State Coach of the Year at the 5A level. Chris Garcia, Defensive Player of the Year, First Team Linebacker, an honorable mention running back. Nick Tybel, First Team Defensive Back. Matt Craig, First Team Defensive Line. Preston Kirk, Second Team Wide Receiver. Quinn Dreher, Second Team Defensive Line and Offensive Line. Cole Chandler, Second Team Quarterback. Joe Kinsey, Second Team Center. And Matthew Willis, honorable mention Offensive Line. And next is swimming. The swim team continues to improve despite not having the year-round club swimmers like the rest of their league. The team is composed of 52 swimmers, 15 boys and 37 girls. They're coached by Cindy Morrison. The boys are 0-4 in meets, but Joseph Reedy recently broke the 200 free and 100 backstroke school records. And the girls, on the other hand, are 1-3, and they continue to work hard. The swim team's next meet is tomorrow, January 13th, and it's at South Albany High School. And the girls' cheerleading team is continuing to practice for their first competition. They're coached by Courtney Sargent. And dance team hosted the annual Snowball Dance this past Saturday,
January 12th as a fundraiser for their efforts. They're in the process of counting the money they received, but from the attendance, they look like they received like a lot of money, and so it's good. And they continue to train and work hard for their next meet, the state and high school invite, Saturday, February 2nd. The boys wrestling team continues to achieve success. Leaders Quinn Dreyer and Isaac Tobin continue to stand out and serve as role models for the rest of the team. Dreyer has not lost a single match yet, while Tobin has only lost 3. The team is coming off a solid performance at the Earl Gillis tournament in Newburgh this past Saturday, January 12th. The next meet is scheduled for Friday, January 18th at the Oregon Classic in Redmond. The girls basketball team still seems to be facing challenges with a 4-7 record and 0-2 league record. This past Friday, January 11th, the team lost in a 52-56 nail-biter. They will continue to search for improvement as they face Woodburn tomorrow night, January 15th in Woodburn. And the boys basketball team, on the other hand, continues their mostly victorious season with an overall record of 8 wins, 4 losses, and a league record of 2 wins and no losses. The team overcame Crescent Valley this past Friday, January 11th, and they're practicing for the upcoming matchup with Woodburn Wednesday, January 16th to improve upon their 7th in state ranking. That's all for sports. Thank you.
Great. Any questions for these guys tonight? Thank you very much, you guys. Thank you for the gifts also.
Yes,
Pretty cool.
have fun.
Thank you.
And we had some others on our table too. I saw some from Mark Twain and I didn't get a chance to look through all of them, but thank you everybody. Okay, I'd like to open it up for our first audience with visitors. Would anybody like to address the board tonight? No takers? Okay, we'll have a second one later on in the meeting. There's a little flip-flop on the agenda. We normally have discussion items before the administrative and staff reports, but we flipped those two because Andy has some things to share that he thought might help with our discussion items. So, Andy.
Thank you very much, Tim. Good evening, and I do be speaking about actually three topics that are timely and to bring you latest information specific to these topics. First of all, we do a revised agenda this evening, and that's because of the teaching calendar, draft teaching calendar for school calendars for 2013 and 14 is a discussion item for you this evening, and I can address any questions you may have when you bring that up for discussion. I would like to, I'm going to see how tech savvy I am. I'd like to share some information about school safety and crisis response, and I'd also like to provide you a brief update on school facility planning to this point. I've got 8 slides that I'd like to use, and so, Herb, it might be better for you to maybe sneak off to the side. The rest of you just maybe adjust your chairs a little bit and be fine. And Mark Hannon?
Yes, sir.
Would you mind turning off the lights?
On it.
Just the main bank, I think the right switch over there works, Mark. So, before we get into the first slide, I want to, first of all, just comment to the board, and I think you're aware of this based upon some emails I've sent to you since the horrific shooting in Connecticut just prior to Christmas break. And you've got an incredible school district here, and I know that's not news to the 7 of you, and you've got incredible administrators and incredible teaching and classified staff who make it a priority, student and employee and visitor safety at all times, each and every day. However, with that said, an incident like what we experienced in Connecticut is reason to remind ourselves of the ongoing need for safety awareness, for crisis management, and for pursuit of options to create environments where our kids are as safe as possible. And I think, before I go on any further, it's important to note that from a safety standpoint, even though we've had incidents happen, from the safety standpoint, I'm very proud of this school district for providing the safe environment for our kids in a variety of ways. Now, you've got a lot of policies that address safety in this school district. There's not just one, there's not just 2, there's not just 10, there are a lot. And those safety policies address everything from check-in, check-out procedures, to threat assessments of students, to awareness of others on site, to your partnerships with law enforcement, just a boatload of them. And I think you've done a nice job over the last many years of visiting and revisiting your policies specific to safety and safety management. Doesn't mean that some additional review of those can't occur, but I make that statement simply because I believe you've done a good job getting to the point where we are. And if you as a board believe there are other policies or policies for us to address or readdress, of course we're open-minded to that, and I'll follow your lead. However, I think just as a reminder to you and to the public that we've done a nice job of keeping up with policies specific to safety in this district. Second to that, after the incident occurred, the district responded fairly quickly. We were in touch with parents through the One Call Now system. Principals were in touch with their staff. Their age-appropriate messages shared with students as appropriate. And of course, it was very close to break, and so the time was limited in what we shared, what we chose to share. When we returned, additional communication happened with parents. Administrative team has now met. We've also emailed quite a bit. I've had interaction with Clackamas County Sheriff's Office, Marion County Sheriff's Office, and Silverton Police Department on a variety of levels specific to safety management and reviewing our practices and processes in the buildings. Administrators and I met earlier this week, and one of the topics that we met was being certain that there were practices occurring in buildings that are practices that are consistently applied across the district. And you see some of those there in front of you. These are consistently used practices and applied, and a reminder to principals to be certain that they are in place was also reminded of each of them, in addition to letters going home that reminded parents of some of these practices, like greeting students and being attentive during the school day, confirming the perimeter doors are locked, using well-defined check-in, check-out procedures, etc. Just a variety of practices that we think are pretty important. Oops, wrong one. Sorry, I gotta go back one. We've got school emergency and crisis procedures posted in every classroom, workstation, evacuation, fire, and other drills occur on a routine basis. And other drills, by the way, include a lockdown drill and evacuation drills within the building in anticipation of what we can anticipate, at least in each of the buildings of the district. The third one there is a real important one. Staff and student, and I think I could also say volunteers, vigilance to anything out of the ordinary. And there are examples in this district that are not uncommon for principals to address simply because they are out of the ordinary. A person sitting in a parking lot for an extended period of time, somebody wandering around campus without any particular purpose. Those are dealt with. Those people are confronted, and those situations are addressed appropriately. Use of reliable communication devices from the playground or other areas of the school to the main office and vice versa. And of course, and then the last one is somewhat new, but we do encourage staff members to carry their cell phones with them. We really can't require that per se, but we do strongly encourage it from a safety standpoint. I think that speaks volumes about how we can respond in some safety circumstances. So I share that information with you because I know this is a topic of discussion tonight, but I wanted you to have a few talking points directly from me, and of course I can answer any questions that you may have as we move into that. I'm going to transition very quickly into facilities, the segue that I'm going to make is specific to safety as it relates to school facilities. It has been part of the thinking process to this point, but it's surely enhanced with the recent incident in Connecticut. And that is what we can do from a safety perspective, from a facility perspective related to safety, and whether if a bond were to be approved by the electorate in this district, whether bond dollars, targeted bond dollars could be considered for use from a district-wide safety perspective. And I believe that the answer is yes, and I'll get into that in just a moment. But before I do that, I want to just give you a brief update of where we've gone since we've last met in mid to late December, and to address some questions that have surfaced, to also let you know what some community input has been to this point. First of all, I've done multiple presentations in the community, and I'll share a little bit more about that in a moment, but the three priorities that are consistently addressed, and I'm encouraging you to do the same in your conversations with folks if you haven't started already, are the adaptive reuse of the Slater Street campus, completion of district-wide upgrades and deferred maintenance projects, and vacating Eugene Field School. Those are the three primary objectives that are within the facility recommendations that each of you have received. The other one, which is more of a global priority, and I've heard you say this to this point, that since you haven't taken action on a bond yet, you haven't made this decision. But I believe that each one of you still each of you still has the mindset of maintaining the $3.35 per thousand of assessed value taxation rate, which with present day values as of today is right around 36.9 or $37 million. And so those are the messages that are being consistently sent to folks as we make presentations in the community. So related to adaptive reuse of the Schlater Street campus, we've had multiple meetings now with the architect, program manager. We've also brought in the City of Silverton staff, had a couple board members, Irv and Tim, that were part of that meeting as well, fire district. We have even brought the state fire marshal in to give us some very specific and clear direction of what needs to happen in that building if we were to repurpose it through remodeling or demolition and reconstruction. That will be part of the proposal that you're hearing as well, but it clearly gave the architect some direction about what needs to occur in that building as well. Conceptual designs of the campus will be shared with you at your January 28th work session. They're being developed as we speak. I think you'll see that there will be given some defined consideration for instructional application of the building. In other words, I think if you're given architect permission to say design a building that can meet the needs of 5th through 8th grade students, and don't give him or her a price tag, you're going to have some very creative, some very well thought out, applied educational practices that will probably better serve the needs of 21st century education than the limitations that may occur with the remodeling of Schlater. And I say limitations not in a negative way, but the limitations are those that I just defined a little bit. Repurposing the building and keeping within that maximum amount of money that I think that you're all on the same page with your willingness to ask the community as far as the bond is concerned. And so even though the design, I think you'll see from the architects, will meet the instructional needs, they may not have all and shouldn't necessarily have all of the cutting edge educational variables that you might hear from some architects in 2013. We did ask the architects to take a look at between 125 and 140 square feet per student. That's the range of square footage that we have now between the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade classrooms at Robert Frost School and Mark Twain School. Schlater Street campus, we pulled this out. This is something that I think you folks likely were shown in 2006. This is the Oregon State Geological report specific to the Schlater Street campus. It's another document. It's a document I believe that you used to inform the voters in 2006, or at least one of them, about the danger of this building. Take a look at the bottom right-hand corner. The the collapse potential based upon this evaluation is very high. It's the highest you can have in the state of Oregon based upon this evaluation at 100%. What that means in layman's terms, if an earthquake happens, the building's coming down. And that's largely based upon the design of the building, the construction material of the building, the reinforced masonry that's used on all sides of the building. The multi-story portions especially. The single-story portions are in much better shape than the multi-story portions. I just want to make sure that you're aware of that as some additional information to consider. The second topic is completion of district-wide upgrades and deferred maintenance projects. Pete Paradis is working on these, and he has categorized them. You'll be seeing those in late this month as well. They'll be categorized by fire, life, and safety projects, by building finishes. There we're largely talking paint because a number of our buildings are in need of paint. Facility sustainability, and Pete is categorizing those projects based upon able to obtain additional life out of each building for the foreseeable future. It's based upon committee recommendations and based upon, I believe, conversations I've heard from you to this point, that there is a need for us to continue using our buildings. And so in order to do so, we've got to put some money into them. The technology infrastructure and safety, those are two items which largely fall under the upgrades. If you see the word above, the deferred maintenance is the first three, and then the upgrades would be the bottom two. We do have some information coming. It just arrived today, and I haven't had a chance to look at it because I was out of the building most of the day. But we are looking at attempting to get the technology infrastructure at an equal threshold across all buildings in the district. Not necessarily talking equipment and fixtures and et cetera, even though that could be part of the bond if there were sufficient funding, but I am talking about infrastructure and ability to use electronic internet-based one-to-one based devices in each one of the buildings equally, so that if you're Evergreen or Victor Point or Silverton High School, you've got equal access to the latest technology specific to education. And so some of that came from, of course, the committee, and I think it's a valuable topic that needs to be considered in the bond. Safety, already discussed that a little bit. The projects that have been suggested specific to safety district-wide, again, include things like surveillance cameras at each one of the buildings, consideration of electronic door locks at the main entrances of each one of the buildings, upgrades to the hardware of classroom doors so we don't have to have teachers literally in a lockdown situation reaching out to use their key to lock their classroom door. They can actually do it from the inside through a push button mechanism or otherwise. And other ideas that have surfaced include voice over IP communication system, so that every school in the district has identical ability to communicate with each other through intercom and telecommunication throughout the district. Those are not inexpensive items by any means, but they're items that we're taking a look at from a district-wide safety standpoint. I do want to comment also briefly on this topic. We've had a couple of questions by folks in the community about whether there will be equal application of deferred maintenance projects across the district. And my answer to that is generally no. And part of that is because we have some buildings that are older than others. We have some buildings that are in higher need of deferred maintenance projects than others. I'll give you an example. We've got a structural roof replacement problem out of Butte Creek School. We think that there's a need for that entire structure, the roof structure, portion of the structure, to be replaced. We don't have any other buildings in the district in that position, but that's a very pricey tag, and unfortunately, it's in dire need. We can't even allow any snowpack on that roof out there simply because an engineer's told us too much snow on that roof could damage the structure and could damage people inside if it were to collapse. So that's an example. Every building will be obtaining something. Every building will be obtaining something of significance from a technology and safety standpoint, but I think from a deferred maintenance standpoint, it depends on which building we're referring to. And the third topic is, of course, vacating Eugene Field School. That continues to be a topic that we're looking into and taking very seriously. The condition of the facility is something that the community has asked us to look into a little bit more. We've had feasibility studies dating back to the mid-90s and as recent as in the mid-2000s. We did secure the services of, I apologize, I need to look this up, Skanska Building Incorporated out of Portland. They did an evaluation of the building, a current evaluation late last week. You will have an executive summary of that evaluation prior to your next meeting, so you'll get a chance to review that as well. I anticipate that you'll see similar information from this study as we've seen in the last couple of studies, and that is that the conditions in the building are in question. And like I've told many people when I present, I question the longevity of your ability to use that building into the future. I think the second bullet up there is also important to remember, is that you've got currently insufficient room for full-day kindergarten at Eugene Field School. I think most other schools in the district, we can make it work if we had to begin full-day kindergarten tomorrow. You don't at Eugene Field, and that's a concern. Also want to comment briefly on grade configurations, because that's been another question that's been asked of community members. And what I've told folks is that there's been no final decision made on grade configurations, but people will want to know. I think you're going to be in a unique position, and I hope to give you some direction specific to this, but what I've heard from folks is that on both sides, that there are some people in the community who are okay with the number of transitions that we have. There are other people that would love to see fewer transitions, and I'm referring to transitions and referring to Eugene Field, to Robert Frost, to Mark Twain, and then to the high school for in-town students. From an educational standpoint, fewer transitions and having multiple grades clustered together in one building is a bonus. That's a good instructional practice if there's any way that you can provide that. So interestingly enough, and this is a little different than what I had anticipated, I'm hearing from feedback from community folks to this point that there is interest in potentially creating 2 K-4 campuses if we were to reconfigure the Schlater campus into a 5-8 campus. And some of that comes from the sense that folks see in being able to provide good instructional practices, from standardization of curriculum and a variety of other things. I think it's fair to say, though, it could make some people nervous simply because in the next few months you will not, and I will not, have sufficient time to generate a recommendation for attendance boundary changes or anything of that sort. And if you had 2 K-4 schools, you'd have to consider attendance boundary changes unless you could come up with an idea that could allow you to fill both of those buildings without attendance boundary changes. And things like magnet schools have been suggested or other thoughts. So I think if you were to move ahead at some point in time here in the next month or two, we were going to have to make a decision specific to what those grades could look like. And as of this day, it would be telling folks we're going to place students at Mark Twain and Robert Frost in a K-4 capacity, but what that looks like has yet to be sorted out. And I think I'd like you to discuss that a little bit so I can get your sense and your feeling about what that looks like. Next steps, we've been doing a bunch of school and community presentation. Tim has joined me in a few. I think I counted up today. I've done 16 to this point. I've got another dozen scheduled within the next 3 or 4 weeks. I'm also reaching out to other groups. We have presented only a couple of times in the rural area. We need to get out in the rural areas even more. So considering things like a monitored community group, Scotts Mills Grange, and so forth, see if we can get the word out. There are still people coming to us today, even with all the attention we've given to this, saying, haven't heard a thing about it, haven't heard a thing about it. So I think we've got more work to do in that arena. You've got a work session on the 28th. That work session will have a lot of information presented to you, including a program budget. You'll have your initial program budget for what it could look like for Bond based upon that, with all the elements up to that $36.9 million mark. Second community forum is scheduled for January 30th. That's a special board meeting. Similar information that you receive at the work session will be provided at the community forum on the 30th. And of course, the newspaper's been reasonable in working with us on this, both publications in town, and we have a lot of information on the website, and we're doing our best to keep that current. As a reminder, if you were to place a bond on the May ballot, you would have to take action no later than your March 11th regular meeting. So I believe that's the last slide. I'm going to leave it at that. That's way too much talking for me, but I'm going to leave it at that and let you folks run with it during your discussion items. But that's the information I wanted to present to you at this time, and I can answer questions during your discussion, or if you have any for clarification, either right now.
Any questions for Andy right now?
Just a comment. When you discuss security, safety. When you discuss safety, I think we ought to be discussing security as well. Many of the items you mentioned there really fall more in the security bucket than the safety bucket. So I think that helps clarify for the community as well.
Okay, thanks, Wally. Anything else? Jan, financial report.
You should have received the report in the mail. I don't have anything to add. It's in its usual format. If you have questions, I'll be happy to discuss them.
Anything for Jan tonight? Okay. Linda Brown, special education report.
Staying on? Yeah.
Yeah, the slide will switch on.
Okay, there we go. Tonight, for the special ed department, I just wanted to take a step back and kind of give you some of the frameworks that we're operating in. Just finished our census count. We have 497 students right now, with 27 students in the hopper for evaluations and 18 students that were with us but are now gone. If you look at the front page of your handout, it defines the different type of programs we have. We have programs such as speech groups, which could be as simple as articulation groups, working on some language skills. Social skills groups are ran by both our behavior specialists as well as our autism team. So that's a really nice addition with our autism team this year. Then we have learning resource centers, and those centers are provided in, see it all there? Oh, there it is. Our learning resource centers are provided in all of our schools as well as the charter school. Same thing with social skills group and speech groups. And then we get into our structured learning programs. You can see where I have those programs provided. That program, the structured learning program, is really helpful for students that might have behavioral challenges. It's a very structured program with lots of predictability, monitoring of students' behaviors throughout the day. And we're finding with our structured learning programs that we are seeing an increased need to support kids with mental health type of concerns. So I've been working on some committees in the county to try to bring some more resources into town. Our basic skills classrooms serve our students with cognitive challenges, and I would say our basic skills classes as well as our structured learning programs are right at capacity. We are keeping those classrooms very full with students that truly need that level of support. And then functional skills classroom, what's happened in that area, we have a group of students that are at the primary level and a group of students at the high school level that are coming in with multiple disabilities, requiring instruction provided in a one-to-one format, paced at the student's individual pacing. These students are really involved. Our younger programs down at Eugene Field, Aaron Johnson, our new teachers, supporting that program, and he's doing a phenomenal job. That classroom currently has 9 students with 4 assistants. It's a pretty intensive group of kids. And also at our high school level, we have 5 students that really, once again, need that one-to-one instruction. And those students are using the new learning environment out in the house, and I invite you to come over and see the house behind the high school. It's a wonderful environment for a softer, kinder, quieter approach to education that we're using from our most involved high school kids. And then the other program that we have kind of bits and pieces of right now, our transition learning program. Students that finish high school, their senior year of special education, if they get a modified diploma, extended diploma, or certificate of attendance, those students have the right to come back and be with us till age 21. The services provided after that senior year all need to be vocationally oriented, so that would be our transition learning center. So any questions about our basic programs?
And I just wondered, and I'm sure there's some crossovers between the groups, but out of the 497, what percentage is basic skills? I mean,
oh yeah, that's what I was talking in my head. 85% of our kids are in learning resource centers, speech groups, or social skills groups where they're in regular education 80% or more of their day.
Okay.
So vast majority of our kids. But yeah, we also have about 14% of our kids are in the basic skills, SLP, kind of self-contained. So that number is a little bit high, but when you look at the individual needs of our kids, they really need that much help. And then,
Linda, our numbers continuing to grow. I know they have over the past few years. Is
yeah,
the trend continuing?
Yeah, it's slowed down a little bit, but what's happening is our numbers are growing slightly, but the intensity of the kids are increasing, and so they're needing a lot more help and support. If you look at the second page of the document, I just wanted to highlight our special education staff. These guys come in every day, giving their heart to kids, supporting them, helping each child do everything they possibly can. It's a pretty big team, and it's a pretty diverse group of individuals and professionals. If you look over on the right-hand side, I list our specialists, and I also let you know if they're a contract with Willamette ESD or regional programs. We've gradually taken back a lot of our ESD programs. So right now we only get speech, augmentative communication, PT, OT, family support advocate. Next year my radar is on PT and OT services, of possibly bringing that in-house by a contract with maybe some local agencies. So I'm exploring that a little bit, but we have kids with all kind of needs, and we have all kind of professionals on board to help them. It's a big group. And then if you look at, this is the highlight of my little presentation. This year, the district's involved in 2 new programs. One's called Medicaid Administrative Claiming, and the other one's called School-Based Health Services. The first one, MAC, we engage 3 surveys every year. It's a time analysis, and we make a cost pool of people in our district most likely to help students or families with health conditions. Or mental health conditions. And so you do that survey, things like care teams, student support teams, providing information about Medicaid are all activities on that survey day that we can claim. Our first survey resulted in the district earning $64,467.99. So we were just really excited about that number. In talking to Multnomah ESD, who's partnering with us, most schools get within about $10,000 of their base figure. So, you know, our next survey will be in winter quarter, and then we'll have another one in spring. Just as Andy and I work on the budget, we're being very conservative, and maybe we would just get $30,000. And I don't want to aim high when it might be a different number, but this is an exciting opportunity for some increased funding for health services, to pay for someone to help with the shots, someone to help with the first aid kits, someone to, we can buy things like defibrillator kits. So there's a lot of good general health stuff that we'll be able to do with our MAP dollars, and I'm working with Andy to refine our thoughts about that. So that was a big, neat surprise for us. The second one, school-based health services for students that are eligible for special ed and eligible for Medicaid if their IEPs have delegated health services listed or health protocol. We can now bill Medicaid for those, and we get 65% of what we've established as our rate. So I work with Jan, we figure out what that rate is. So last year, we started in January, and we had 3 kits that we're just tracking. We're being very thoughtful in the documentation that we're pulling together, and we were able to bill from January till June. That group of kids brought in $24,762. This year, we're continuing to roll out the program as our IEPs come due, adding the appropriate documentation on the IEP, getting the appropriate documentation from the doctor. So that group of Medicaid kids is growing. Right now we have about 12. When I look at our rosters and upcoming IEPs, we probably have about 10 more kids that will be able to really bill Medicaid for that.
So are you saying that we're billing Medicaid for services we're already providing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a reimbursement type of thing. So, for example, when I was talking about our functional skills class, the students that have the medical conditions, the seizures that need direct adult assistance and supervision all day, we're able to bill that time to Medicaid. So it's kind of exciting opportunity to bring in some funds to help provide support for the medical services in the district, as well as some of the medical services we provide for special ed kids. Then the last page of my handout, this is looking toward next year. We have some challenges that we'll need to overcome and fix, but I'm sure we can do it. The first thing is Senate Bill 2283 talks about transition students. And again, these are the kids that get a certificate, extended diploma, or modified diploma, have the ability to come back. So we are mandated to develop a program that would provide 990 hours of service time. 990 hours is the same amount of time high school students get, but in this case, service means service. So if you're on the bus, your bus route's a part of that 990 hours. Lunchtime's a part of that 990 hours. So what we need to do is we develop our IEP. We have a transition page within that document, and the transition plan needs to focus on what does the student want to do after their high school years. If a student doesn't want to come back, that's totally their right. As an IEP team, we can say whatever the student wants to do, maybe 400 hours of service time is all that student needs. So it's an IEP-driven team decision. I can't come and say, okay, we're only going to provide 10 hours a week of service time. I can't do that overlapping thing. It has to be based on specific student need and what they want to do. So it's all around the vocational. So when I look toward next year and the next couple of years, next year we'll have at least 17 kids eligible for that transition type of program, and the year after that's about 24. So that number is growing. We'll have to have a program the very first day to support those kids. We won't have a big idea of how many kids are wanting to stay, so it'll be something I'll have to work with the high school just to get those numbers and understanding. There does seem to be a pattern of families choosing to have their children come to us between age 18 and 21, especially our most impacted kids. So that will be a challenge. The other one is regional services, and regional services are the foundation of special education. Way back in the 70s when we started special ed, and we would have students that were deaf or blind or intellectual disability students. The school districts didn't know what to do. They didn't have the expertise, so they designed regional areas that would have professionals to provide those services. So regional services right now are deaf and hard of hearing, vision, autism, orthopedic handicap, traumatic brain injury. So the state legislature has decided to reorganize who pays for those type of things. So regional services will no longer be paying for those activities. School districts will be picking up that tab. So it's a shifting of responsibilities to us. The two main areas will be child find and then providing specially designed instruction. Child find, we've been kind of ahead of the curve because we do have our own autism specialists and they're able to give the testing, so that's good. Orthopedic impairment, we need to have an OT and PT that can do evaluations, thinking about the school district and the school realm. It's not a health type of orthopedic support, but it's all around helping the child be able to access their education. Traumatic brain injury, we've got that covered. Jennifer Bingham's one of our regional traumatic brain injury specialists, so we have that covered. Deaf and hard of hearing, child find. Now this is where the bells and whistles need to be going off for everyone. We are now responsible for hearing evaluations. If a child is born and they're found that there's a hearing problem at the hospital, the next step for that hearing evaluation comes to the school district to do that initial evaluation.
As a baby?
Because it's all around the educational. So when you look at special education, it's birth at age 21. So now we're having to pick up some of those evaluations. So Andy and I are working with the ESD to see how many evaluations that typically is. The weird thing is they're mandating that for deaf and hard of hearing kids, but not for vision. And to me, vision and deaf and hard of hearing are both impacting disabilities. And vision is actually more impacting than deaf and hard of hearing because deaf and hard of hearing kids can't access the technology. So we'll get you more information about that.
Who decided that?
It's been the state legislature. I've been fussing with them, and so. Yeah, so I don't know if that's 2 or 3 evals for the early childhood kids or 30. As far as the school age kids, we do all of our hearing evaluations. It's typically 4 or 5 kids that we send over to ESD to get a more thoughtful evaluation.
So Linda, are there any funds associated with those? Are they just unfunded mandate? Okay.
Pretty much.
It seems to be, should be outside our scope.
Yeah. What used to happen is in Willamette ESD area, there's a pile of money at the state level. And when we do our IEP census time and we flag kids as regional, that says to the state, send that money to ESD because there's so many regional kids. So all the schools in the ESD did that. So kids with autism, orthopedic, that just let money go from ODE down to ESD, and then they provided those regional funds and regional services. That same process is going to be used, but we're not getting the funding for it. When you look at the new structure for like orthopedic kids, they're going to have some equipment. For vision kids or deaf and hard of kids, once they're eligible, they'll have the direct instruction part. So school districts actually, our school district actually used to supplement the regional budget to provide OT-PT, and there's just been a whole string of concerns and difficulties with ESD around regional programs. So I'll keep you informed on that one.
So Linda, is it any time, like from when a kid is born at the hospital to when they start school, if there's a
educational impact, because early intervention has services for children that are hard of hearing, vision, deaf, all that for the younger kids.
So if there's an indication during that time of a hearing problem or something, it falls on us to evaluate that.
Yeah.
This is for all children or just economically disadvantaged?
Oh, for all kids.
I think it's fair to say that that's actually been in place for quite a while. And for autism, for deaf and hard of hearing, for quite a variety of services. We've had child find that's required by law for years and years. And so Linda works with a number of preschool people, preschool providers and parents for years before they come to school, simply because that's been the case. The difference here is that the regional dollars have been reduced, and that service has just now been transferred to the school district rather than to the ESD.
Yeah. So the early intervention at birth to 3, we've actually been providing transportation for these little ones to services. We've been providing transportation to the early childhood kids, which is the 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. So Now they're really going to be under our wing. And then the last area for specially designed instruction, autism, we have that covered. Again, orthopedic impairment, we would need to do some type of contract maybe with the local agency to provide those services. So a few little challenges. I've tried to really look into the future. So some of these, we've had these covered by hiring our own folks, but it's a shifting in times. Any questions?
Yeah, Linda, you stated, I think you stated earlier about you're seeing 18 to 20-year-old high needs, the parents are moving a major just for that specific age range?
No, they're moving into our district just to get our special ed programs, and then when they turn 18, instead of maybe staying at home or in some other agency, they're just staying with us in the school setting for longer. Yeah. So a few years ago, I haven't heard about recently, but there's adult foster cares that started at 18. We've had one of those homes in our district for a while, and when they moved in, then those kids needed the 18 to 21 type of services. So we're taking it one day, one kid at a time, and doing the best we can with wonderful staff and trying to think outside the box to support the whole crew. So, any questions?
Any other questions for Linda? Thank you, Linda. The club gets a little bigger every year.
Really want this. So this is the first time I'm sitting in front of you to talk about Victor Point specifically. So as that pink sheet's coming around, we'll start on the Victor Point side, and that just has some noteworthy statistics and numbers and things like that. I've had a few questions about enrollment, so I'll just start with that. We are continuing to climb. We are currently at 201, and that's about where we've been since the beginning of the school year. We haven't had many late enrollments, but that's significantly higher than we've been in years past. So just to give you some perspective, our class sizes are still relatively under control. We range from 22 to 28 in our classes. And when you are wondering where those kids come from, I just did some quick data. So 72 kids transfer into Victor Point. That's about 35% of our total enrollment. So just better than a third of our kids are transfers in. 10% of our enrollment comes from other districts, and then 25% of our enrollment comes from transfers within the Silver Falls district. So that's where those kids are coming from. Statistically, curriculum-wise, we completed the first few rounds of the oral reading fluency assessment. We did a beginning of the year fluency assessment that was for everybody at Victor Point in grades 2 through 5. And we did that again right before progress reports went home. And both of our classrooms at grades 2 and grades 4, our class average already exceeds the grade level benchmark. We have a few kids that are not yet at there, but the average is above, and we've got those few kids that are still needing to meet that benchmark, all in our intervention groups. So we're feeling really good about our reading fluency and the successes that our teachers are experiencing with that right now. We've got 2 8th graders who are currently enrolled in Algebra 1, and they are following along with the high school curriculum using the high school textbooks. They follow the exact same lesson schedule that the high schoolers follow, so they're right in line, and they will take their semester 1 final the same week that the high school students take that as well. So those two, according to their teacher, are well on track to earn high school credit. So again, that's a huge opportunity for our kids at Victor Point. We currently have 37 kids in intervention groups or tutoring. That's in addition to our special education students. So we have our regular identified SPED kids, and they are served in some of those same intervention groups and tutoring slots. But on top of our special education population, we have another 37 kids. So that's just about 1 in 5 students who are receiving some sort of intervention and supplemental instruction above and beyond on top of that special education population. So we really have refined and redesigned our schedule and the way we use our assistants and even the way we use our volunteers to make sure that we're maximizing any sort of opportunity for kids who need additional time and support. And majority of that is focused in reading and math. We do some writing support, but I would say we are better than competent in providing the kind of support that kids need in reading and math. So we feel really good about that. 8th grade students, in just a few weeks, will be participating in NAEP testing. That's the National Assessment of Educational Progress. We've been randomly selected for that, at least 3 times. And Megan and I were arguing about whether it's even been 4 times in the last 8 years. So our kids are troopers. It's, you know, it's not that big of a deal, but vets come in and, you know, whatever. So we've sent home letters for all of that, and all of our 8th graders were selected. So all of our kids will be participating in that in either reading or math. So it's a quick, you know, 90 minutes to a 2-hour setting. And just as of note, mark your calendars if you are interested in the chili feed. This year we are back to the Thursday before spring break. So we've jumped around a little bit in recent years, but we're settling back at that Thursday night right before spring break. So that's the 21st of March, and we serve out chili from 5 to 8 that night. So it's just kind of a fun community event. It is getting busier and busier with 200 kids, and you start to feel the squeeze of that a little bit on big events like that. But it's a fun night to be out and about. We like it. Some focus areas, so some things that we are talking about either in staff meetings, PLC, professional development sessions, or just in my individual conversations with teachers. These are the kinds of things we've really been honing in on. Specifically writing. Our writing assessment scores last year were not where we wanted them to be, and our staff concluded once again that we need to continue to really center in on this and continue kind of a laser-like focus on writing. We can confidently say we're pretty good at teaching kids to read, but for whatever reason we're having trouble translating that into the kind of consistency in writing. So our assessment scores last year ranged from 35% at one grade level to 85% passing at another grade level. So we're not happy, we're not pleased, that's not good enough. So we're continuing to push writing, specifically continuing conversations about how are we teaching writing versus just assigning writing. So are we just saying, here's your topic, write your essay, we're going to edit it, and we're going to grade it, or are we really zeroing in on what is the skill set that you need to be a proficient writer in choosing the correct tone, choosing the correct word choice and vocabulary, organizing your writing in the best manner, identifying with your reader and your audience prior to starting your paper. All those nuances, we really have kind of tried to zero in on those this year, and I'd like to say that will work really well. So we're anxious to see where our assessment scores come out. I do think that teachers would tell you that they feel better about the kind of instruction they're doing in writing this year. So I'd love to see that translate into some increased academic achievement. So the other thing that we sort of tackled this year was the design and implementation of a new care team referral process and trying to build a more streamlined approach to getting students into an intervention group. So obviously we start with the IEPs, we've got all of our special ed kids, and we build a schedule that accommodates and meets all the letter of the law of their IEPs, but then we have all these additional students who are not special ed kids who need additional time and support in order to make growth. So we had become perhaps just a bit hit and miss in the way that we were identifying kids and getting them the kind of help. The squeaky wheel was getting the grease, and I felt like we needed to really tie up some of those loose ends and maybe close some of those loopholes so that I could confidently say that we were attempting to meet the needs of every kid who needed additional time and support. So we've built some new protocols, some new paperwork, some new accountability standards in, just so we have some checks and balances. And there's been a good response for that. There were some difficult conversations, and we definitely had to massage through why are we making these changes and what's not working, and sometimes those aren't fun conversations to have. But I really think coming out the other end of the work that we've done this fall, we're in a really good place with getting kids the kind of help that they need at Victor Point. So, and then continuing high leverage instructional strategies. That's just an extension of the Marcia Tate work that we started district-wide last year. Content and language objectives, and then also spending some time at Victor Point talking about the implementation of SBAC and what those new testing requirements are going to look like, what those new kinds of testing questions are going to look like, the kinds of things that we want to begin exposing kids to. So just some of those preliminary discussions. On the back is some curriculum highlights. Data point number 1 right there. This was amazing growth. So we do the kindergarten assessment. We've collected that data for 6 years, and we do intake data. So basically before the kids even start school that first week in September, we do a screening process on all of our kindergartners, and essentially all that measures is what they've learned at home. We haven't provided any instruction. It simply tells us letters, sounds, book knowledge, those kinds of things. And when we compared our late November data this year, with the intake data that we had in September, we saw more than 30 points growth across the district on an average, and we haven't seen that kind of growth in any of the 6 years past. So that's fantastic. That means that the kids that are in our classrooms are responding to the instruction, that we're seeing the kind of gains. They didn't necessarily come in any lower or any higher than they've come in years past, but particularly this fall, in that September to late November window, the kids have been really responsive to the instruction, and we've seen great growth. So that's encouraging in our kindergarten classrooms. And of course, we wanted to celebrate that, and we've honored and recognized our kindergarten teachers for their work. That's clearly attributed to the kinds of efforts that they're putting in to those kids and their instruction in the classrooms. We are working on curriculum standards documents, specifically looking at learning targets, so trying to sort of demystify the CCSS and all of the verbiage that comes with it. If you remember, they were written as very technical documents, and so really honing in on what does that mean? What is the learning target? I can identify the character, plot, and setting in a story. That's a learning target. A teacher understands that, a kid understands that, a parent understands that. That's not the way the standards are written. So we're breaking those down, and we'll have all of those in teachers' hands by the end of this school year. Because again, we're full board CCSS next year, because then SBAC, the new assessment, comes on board the year following. We are continuing to have administrative discussions regarding the fiscal impact of implementation of CCSS and SBAC. Obviously, if the bond measure were to pass and we were able to move forward with some of the technology infrastructure pieces, that would be a huge concern lifted as we start to think about things like the SBAC test having a speaking and listening component. So students being required to wear headphones with a microphone on them and being able to speak back and dictate into the computer, and then concerns about our current bandwidth, being able to manage that kind of exchange, electronic exchange, virtual exchange, across the district in every building if everyone's trying to test at the same time. So we'll need to figure out what that looks like, bond measure or no bond measure. SBAC's coming, and at some point we're going to have to figure out what the fiscal financial impact of that is. We are exploring some common assessment options, including potential implementation of technology-based tests. Lots of the individual school buildings have things in place, accelerated reader or reading counts. Technology-based testing where a student can read a book and then go take a computer-based assessment, testing their comprehension, testing their vocabulary, even testing their reading fluency, and that's all done without a one-on-one necessarily with the teacher, and then the teachers can pull the reports directly off of the computer. It can track kids, it can set goals for kids, and that's all done basically electronically. Just some very early discussions about some benefits of moving to something like that district-wide. So again, we have some comparable data that we could be using to look at the kinds of growth patterns that we're seeing in kids across the district. I don't know if that will go anywhere. I don't know if that would in the end be cost prohibitive, but it's something that we're just beginning to talk about, and something that at minimum we need to explore. We're continuing weekly administrative walkthroughs by district office staff, so I'm out every Thursday morning and someone joins me. Eric's been with me pretty consistently, and in addition this year for the first time administrators have signed up to join me on those as well, so they're out and about with me. It's been great conversation for me to have other administrators with me, but I think it's been really helpful for principals to see in other buildings the kinds of things I'm seeing, for me to be able to point out, you know, I've been here several times and I've seen this consistently over time, and just, it's been a good time for principals to get out in other buildings and just walk through and see things with a new lens and a clear set of eyes. That's fostered some good dialogue, so that's been a good practice. And I just have cleared my Thursday mornings to make that happen, and we set out a calendar far enough in advance that for the most part, most principals have been able to clear that time to join me. So that's been a good move. We also have some targeted pilots of math curriculum out right now. Basically, that means that publishers have volunteered to send free samples of a grade level worth of material, a classroom set of material, and we've got multiple teachers at multiple buildings at multiple grade levels basically piloting those materials. At some point, we will need to come to some sort of decision regarding K-5 math. We have 6-12 math materials adopted, implemented, and well on their way, and we do not have anything consistent in place for kindergarten through 5th grade. We need to make that move. Again, there's a financial impact for that, obviously. But there's going to come a point where the need for the unified curriculum and the unified presentation of the rigorous material, again, to prepare for CCSS and SBAC, that's not going to be an option any longer. So we're just in the preliminary process, again, of weeding through what kind of materials out there, what is truly aligned, what fits our current teachers' needs. That will be a somewhat lengthy process, but we've started that. And then finally, we're just kind of continuing discussions. The technology committee, I sit on that, kind of with a curriculum hat to listen to the technology discussions. And what does that look like as far as technology enhanced instruction, particularly when we talk about one-to-one devices? And if we get iPads in classrooms, what does that mean instructionally? Or if students have their own access to one-to-one technology, they have their own tablet, they have their own iPad, they have their own iPhone, they have mini computers in their hands. Where are we, what is our thought process, our vision for what that looks like instructionally over the next 5 or 10 years? So that's been a healthy dialogue, and that discussion will continue for a long time. But it's good. I just feel like we're kind of on the cusp of lots of different things, and so sometimes I feel spread pretty thin, but then sometimes I feel like all these things eventually are all coming back to the same place. So it's good work, and I've got a great team, and I've got a great cabinet level, district level staff, and great administrators. So we're doing good work, most definitely. Have any questions?
Yeah, technology. Have you seen any, various districts that have a highly, that have classrooms that are full of technology, lots of one-to-one devices? Are they seeing results? What's their feedback?
Right. So I don't have firsthand knowledge. The curriculum directors that I meet with on a regular basis in WCC, so that's Willamette Curriculum Consortium, are not representative of those kinds of districts. Canby would be an example that has gone full bore one-to-one devices and iPads and all sorts of things. But I don't have a personal connection or relationship with anyone in Canby to get the direct feedback of we love it or it's coming. I would like to say I'm hoping someone else that I'm friends with does it first. So that there's just kinks and there's a lot of issues that come along with that.
Right. Training
issues. So to be really honest with you, Tom, I don't have enough firsthand knowledge to give you a straight answer to that.
Any other questions for Linda? Great, thank you. Very good report on the information. Moving on to discussion items. The first one, the proposed personal finance course proposed by the high school. For audience members who may not know about this one, the high school has proposed a half-credit increase in graduation requirements, which would be a personal finance class to be taken by seniors, a semester-long course. The content of the course goes way beyond record keeping and keeping a checkbook. It covers mortgages, how to buy a house, how to look for a job, resumes, credit cards, you name it, it's in there. So any discussion on this one tonight? It's an action item tonight, whether we approve this or not. So.
I'd still like to see it as a graded class. That's the only.
Yeah, and I think that's how it's being proposed right now, isn't it, Mark? As a graded class, okay. Anything else?
I think it's a great idea. Let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think it's a really good idea. I think it's really needed for kids these days. So, okay, moving on. School safety management and crisis response, and Wally added security issues to that. Just thoughts that you guys are having about this. I know there's people who get some phone calls, things we may want Andy to look into further. Just a little open discussion about some of these issues tonight.
I've been approached by a wide variety of people on this issue in particular, and specifically around the right to carry concealed handguns in buildings. We've talked a little bit about it. If we were to change our policies to allow that, do we know what our district liability might be?
Is that to me, Walt?
Yeah.
Okay. There is a request into our school district liability company, PACE, and Special Districts of Oregon. Haven't received a conclusive answer at this time. Part of that is, I believe, OSBA, Oregon School Boards Association, gathering some data for the insurance company specific to the current level of use of that policy in the state right now. We haven't seen the results of that yet. I think if I could see into the crystal ball, it would be, there would be an increase in rates. What that increase would be, I'm not certain. And there would be a difference between, at least in my mind, based upon what I understand with our insurance company, is there would be a difference in what that would look like if you were to rescind the policy that you're referring to, Wally, which is policy GBJ, Weapons in Schools for Staff and Volunteers. If you were to rescind that policy and allow concealed weapons, that would likely have less of an impact on insurance rates than requiring arming of staff members.
That was my thought.
Principals, teachers, otherwise. In fact, I think you would likely see your insurance company probably not carry us if we were to arm our staff. But allowing concealed weapon permit holders to carry weapons on campus, I think the jury's still out, and we just haven't heard enough information yet from the insurance company.
Okay. Then on a related subject, I think you discussed talking with Marion County and with City of Silverton about maybe purchasing a police officer in the district. Any comments on that?
Yeah, it comes down to dollars and cents. I mean, the city is not in a position to say that their budget can absorb an SRO again, and I don't anticipate it any time in the future. It's probably an $80,000 price tag for a full-time SRO, hovering in that area range anyway, whether it be from the City of Silverton or Marion County. Marion County would be a little more expensive.
Would they both be willing to work with us? If we were
Oh yeah. No, we'd have partnerships ready to go if we had the money to give them.
Okay, great. Then also in your presentation around security and safety, within our bond measure, I know some of our schools, we talk about having people check in before they go to classrooms and whatnot. A lot of schools, it's really easy to bypass that and go directly to the classroom. Is there a way that we can have the architect or some of the designers look at our buildings and see what we can do about a security entry?
If you're
So
talking...
so basically it forces people to check in before they move on.
Yeah, I mean, we can do that evaluation and see which buildings need that more than others. And you've got circumstances like at Robert Frost where you have 2 buildings, which creates some interesting challenges at Robert Frost. And then you have places like Evergreen School, which has really no welcoming area or office area to come in. So we can surely look into that. I think with that in my mind, Wally, at least my first blush at that comment is if you were to consider changes like that from an architectural facility standpoint, that would have to be paralleled with systems changes within your building, which would likely mean increased staff. That's my sense anyway. But I don't think that's out of reason. I have asked the principals to make certain that they give more of a critical eye and scrutinize their entry points to be certain that everything within their capacity right now is being done to do just that. Be certain that nobody gets in without being seen by somebody, including this campus. And here we have a cutting edge campus, and I know Mark is working on efforts to be certain that that's not happening here as well. But yeah, we can look into that.
All right, thank you.
I was just wondering about the security officers that we already had at one time. They did carry guns at that point, and they no longer have because of insurance reason was one of the biggest reasons. Is the insurance to arm them cheaper than it would be to have a full-time police officer?
That's a good question. I don't know, Julie.
That would be something I'd be interested in looking into.
Okay, I can look into that.
Yeah, I was wondering about that too, Andy, because in my mind, that was a pretty good system we had at the time. So it'd be interesting to know what the specific insurance ramifications of that would be, like Julie said, versus an SRO. And also on the SRO, in my opinion, we would get more, if it was feasible, we'd get more use out of a county person because they could visit the outlying schools that way. And I have heard that when it was a city SRO and even problems that might arise at the high school that they needed to look, that went beyond the school. The city only had so much jurisdiction if it was a kid who may have lived out of town. So I would really like to see what the difference is between an SRO, between the city and the county. And also, I know there's been talk about, talk in the press and things about arming teachers and staff you know, whatever that would look like. That's one thing I've heard from some teachers is, you know, no, we're not comfortable with that. And that's kind of how I feel, but I am pretty interested in looking at rescinding the concealed weapons, or the policy for concealed weapon permit carriers. I think we need to create a deterrent, and so people know that if they have an idea to, you know, do something at a school, there's a possibility that there's going to be a deterrent there, and I am interested in looking at that, you know, from an insurance perspective and more specifics on that also. So. Other discussion?
Well, I appreciate that that comment, Tim. I think that this could be a very long and interesting conversation that we should probably schedule at some point down the road. I think there are lots of reasons why I disagree with you, respectively, but we should probably talk about that in a fairly well-rounded discussion about these issues. The issue of deterrence is compelling on its face, but you have to remember that the people who have committed these horrible acts have finished landing their own lives. You know, I'm not sure that's a deterrence is really viable when you're looking at that kind of thing. The other thing is the concealed weapons permit process only looks at your background, whether you have a criminal record, or whether you have been incarcerated or institutionalized for mental health reasons. It doesn't check the types of medications that you're taking, which is a very big problem in the United States. It doesn't look at your mental stability currently. It's actually fairly easy to get a concealed weapons permit in most states, including Oregon. So I think there's a lot of stuff on the surface that's very compelling, but I think that we should dig very deeply into this issue before we make decisions about harming anybody in our schools besides law enforcement who are trained.
Okay, anybody else have any discussion on this? Okay, that gives us some ideas of things to look at.
Would you like me to bring a copy of policy GBJ to your February regular session?
Yeah,
what I hear from all of you is that you know, the review of the policy and looking at that at a minimum, you'd like to do conversation-wise, David and others. So I can make that available, put that on the agenda in your February meeting if you like.
That'd be great. This is something we're going to need to keep discussing, and like David said, there's a lot of ramifications, you know, for different ideas and things. So it's something we definitely need to keep discussing. Those are just some things that I've heard about that people are interested in looking at, and I think we need to discuss all of it personally. So. Anything else? Anybody? Okay, moving on. School district facility planning and bond election. Andy gave us some updates tonight. Any new ideas, new thoughts on grade configurations or things that Andy shared with us tonight? Thoughts whether we should go for a bond or not? Timelines, things like that? Nobody's very chatty tonight. Go ahead, Wally.
I'm intrigued by the idea of going 2 K-4 schools in town. Intuitively, it seems like a good idea. But I think as you heard at the facilities task force meeting, there wasn't a lot of interest about changing the system we have today. But it just seems like, particularly Eugene Field, the number of kindergarten kids we have just in that building, it'd be great if we could split that up and seem to be a more controlled environment.
Well, if I can comment on that, that's correct. The facilities task force did not make a firm recommendation on K-4s. One of the survey questions was, which do they prefer? And they did answer that 75% of them said they thought a K-4 or K-5 configuration would actually better serve than the transitions. But what I do recall the committee saying is that they weren't willing to make that as a recommendation, that they really believe that it's up to the board to make that distinction based upon community input and other information we have.
Yeah, on the grade configuration also, I've been thinking about this one a lot, and I know we have 3 transitions now in the town schools, but to to have the transition, you know, say we did a K-1-2 at Eugene, or at Robert Frost, and a 3-4 at Mark Twain. The more that has never felt right to me, and I'm not sure why. I don't know if it's the age of the kids. I know there's only a year difference, but that it just hasn't ever felt quite right. And when I first heard about a K-2, K-4s, I thought, oh, competition between the two schools, you know, that's going to be an issue. I think there might be ways around that if we would decide to go with the K-4s. One thing I've heard from some teachers is they really like the idea of K-4s, of having those same families for that long a period of time, to really get to know the kids and, you know, work between grade levels and things like that. So those are just some of my thoughts on it. The K-1, 2, 3, 4 transition, just, for some reason, it's never felt right, and I can't really specifically say why. But, so the K-4 is intriguing to me also. So we would like to hear staff and community input on that also, if people have ideas. Anybody else?
I agree with what you're saying. I think, excuse me, I'm trying to lose my voice this evening, and I'm not sure the mic helps.
Personally, I think that the fewer transitions that we have, and putting children and our youngsters in age-appropriate blocks is the best, most educationally sound, and most acceptable scenario for the community, based on the feedback that I've heard and what I know about this issue. So that would be my comment on this for this evening.
Tim, if I can chime in just one more thing. It's very interesting because sometimes when people don't have anything else to say, they will make a statement like, why do we even have the crate configurations that we currently do in town anyway? And that's just been the way it's turned out. If just a brief history lesson, Eugene Field was a K-8 school at one time. And then when Mark Twain was built in 1956, it was built as a 5-8 school. Eugene Field became a K-4 building. And when Robert Frost was constructed in 1970, it converted to the current grade configurations we have. So part of it is just necessity, what the community was choosing to do at that time. But I agree, having a 2-grade middle school or a 2-grade 3-4 school is goofy. You put that in minutes. It's out of the ordinary. You don't see grade configurations like that.
Yeah, that's a good way to sum it up. Yeah, when I went through, Eugene Field was a K-4 and Mark Twain was a 5-8. And I think maybe they just did the grade configurations at the time for, you know, numbers and space maybe, I'm not sure. So, anybody else? Okay, more to come on this one. Okay, number D, the draft 2013-14 school calendar. We had this in our packet tonight. Pretty straightforward calendar. Any comments? Nothing? I think this got submitted to the association, and they're going to be chiming in on it a little bit. Andy?
They'll receive it tomorrow. I mean, certainly you folks see it first, but yeah, it is a pretty straightforward calendar, keeping in mind everything that we're currently doing. It starts after Labor Day, it ends fairly early in June, it allows 2 weeks at Christmas time. Those all seem to be variables that a lot of employees, and I know parents even have even asked for. There has been a suggestion of, and you may hear more about this, I'm not certain, of potentially looking at moving the parent-teacher conferences from October to Thanksgiving week. It's just a conversation at this point. There are a number of benefits potentially to that, but there are also some drawbacks to that. So I throw that your way just to be prepared if you get a proposal and when you revisit this again next month. Or if you hear from staff members.
Okay, any other discussion items tonight? Anybody got anything else? Okay, moving on to board reports. Anybody have any reports tonight? I know there's a election for 3 of our positions coming up, and Andy sent an email around saying a little bit, what if anybody had decided whether they were going to run or not. Wally, Bert, myself?
I plan on running again, so.
I plan on running again as well.
And I do also. I plan on running again also. So, any other board reports? I have a couple things real.
Just related to that, Tim, be certain that each of you submit your application to Marion County Elections no later than March 21st.
Okay.
And Denise has the applications and all the application information.
Okay. Also, one other thing on discussion items, going back to the facility planning and bond election. I know we need to decide by our March regular meeting if we are going to go for a bond. I think it'd be to our benefit if we could decide that in February. The sooner we decide, the better. I think our January work session and the information we get there will give us a lot more information on whether this is something we want to really pursue or not. But I personally would like to see us decide in February if we could. And that may not, that we may not be able to, but I think the earlier we decide this, the better. So keep that in the back of your minds as a possible goal. I did get a chance, I'll be very brief because the time's getting a little late, but I did get a chance to visit a couple schools. I went to Mark Twain before Christmas break, so it seems like a while ago. But really good things happening up there, great teaching staff. They're doing a lot to help the kids, a lot of interventions in place. I know they're all working really hard because they have an increased number of kids this year, and I think they have more writing labs and more math labs and things where more of the kids are getting interventions, and they're keeping those classes small so that when those classes are going on, it makes some of the other classes a little bit larger for those regular groups and also some of the electives. So I know everybody's working really hard and kind of feeling the pinch of that, but I saw some really good things. Mrs. Hill was having a really good discussion with some kids on a book they were reading. Lots of reading and writing going on up there, in small groups and regular classrooms. Mr. Keller was a 7th grade math teacher, he had a math lab in his room when I was in there. He was showing me a program they use to help these kids, and it works them through their homework assignments and their tests and their assessments and everything, and they know exactly where they are. The kids can look at this and know exactly what they need to turn in yet, what they haven't done, what problems they missed on different things, and what they have to work on. So it was really neat to see that. The artwork in Mrs. Chandler's room was very good as usual. She does an awesome job. Mr. Guptill was continuing to do great things with technology, both in and out of the classroom. When I was in his classroom, he was having the kids do something where they were moving things around on the computer screen in some project they were working on. So very cool to see that. I know he's doing some things with like a school, not a newsletter, but newsletter online or technological newsletter, or whatever, however you would say that. So good things happening up there. One other thing I noticed was a lot of teachers, are putting on the board their content objectives, and I'm seeing this across the district. It's really cool to see, so the kids specifically know what they're working on that week. And so I'm really starting to see commonalities across the district, which is, I think it's going to be real helpful. I think it's really helpful for the kids. Also up at Robert Frost, I went up there the other day. Again, in the classrooms, really good things, lots of reading, writing, math going on. One thing I noticed, every 4th grade classroom I went to was working on math at the time, and they were all working on the same content amongst the classrooms. So that tells me the teachers are all, working on the same things, and the kids are all working on the same things, which I think is a real plus for everybody. 4th graders were also working on some of the Oregon history projects, brought back memories of when my kids were up there and some of the projects they did for the Oregon history stuff. The wagon trains and things like that, pretty cool. 5th grade, spelling, language arts. 6th grade was working on math, and it just amazes me the amount of math the amount of math and the level of math that kids are doing now. I think everything's kind of dropped down a level. So another really cool thing up at Robert Frost, when I was there, they were having an assembly. Robert Frost is this year, and you guys have probably heard about this, it's called a Fuel Play 60 program, and it's a program to increase exercise and nutrition throughout, for kids. And it's sponsored by the National Dairy Council and the NFL. And Robert Frost had almost every student sign a contract to participate in this, and they had such good participation and such good results that they were selected the only school out of the whole state of Oregon to be recognized for their participation in this. And they had a visit from an NFL player, Anthony Newman, and the kids were just psyched. I was there before, and they were all pumped up in the classroom, and they were really excited about this. And the kids have really taken this to heart and done a really awesome job. They have, out on the playground, they've set up some courses for the kids that can do walking and running programs during recess and lunchtime. and the kids have logged, I think they said 1,891 miles or something like that. The kids can, they go out and do their thing, and then they log it into their computer program. And then nutrition is a big part of it. They have food groups and a color of the month food group. And I think January was browns. I thought brownies, all right. But the kids it's been a really good program. The kids were really excited about it. There was a lot of energy at the assembly. Hats off to Mrs. Delgado and Mrs. Matska who headed this thing up. They've done an awesome job, and just a really good thing for our kids to learn more about nutrition and to make it a part of their lifestyle. So besides that, really good things education with Robert Frost also. So good stuff. Okay, anybody else? Any correspondence? I don't think we had any. Okay, in the second audience with visitors, I'd like to open it up. Would anyone like to address the board tonight? Yes, please. If you come up to the table and please sign in with your name and then introduce yourself. And could we get the microphone up?
I think I can speak without the microphone.
Well, I just want the audience to be able to hear.
Oh, okay.
So. Yeah, you're up. You're up.
Andy, I couldn't see you from behind.
That's okay.
The column. My name is Don Billings. I'm a retired commander from the U.S. Coast Guard. I retired in 1982. My last duty station was Cleveland, Ohio, and I was the chief of military readiness there. I came out here in 1996. I came out to Canyon View Bible College. Ended up marrying the camp cook. I've been out here 16 years now. My last full-time job after I retired, I took a private police course from the local community college in Ohio. I worked for 3 years for Wells Fargo Armored Car Service. I was also the captain of security at the East Lake Power Plant. My last job, I took a course for the school bus in Willoughby, Ohio, before I came out here. And when I came out here, I drove for 5 years for the first student from 1989 to 2004. I'm concerned about the security, as you all are, for the students in wake of what happened in Newtown, the tragedy there. And we hope by God it would never happen here. The potential does exist. We all know that. And I've heard you discuss tonight the pros and cons as far as budgetary constraints that took away the armed guards that they used to have at the high school. When I was driving the first student, I was part of the shuttle service that went from Slater over to Pine Street. I met the security guards that we had here at that time. I guess it was due to financial constraints that they discontinued having the guards.
Mr. Billings, it was mostly insurance reasons
Yeah.
at the time.
Again, I hear you discussing it, the liability, the insurance, but God forbid if it happened, those things would not be an issue. I told Mr. Blano when I talked to him, I'm the type that likes to put his money where his mouth is. And I told him that I'd be willing to fund for the weapon, the holster, the ammunition, and the training for any principal or teacher that would be willing to be armed in the school during the school day for the protection of the children. I have weapons at home. I protect my own family. from home invasion. You hear it on the news all the time. The ones that have weapons can protect themselves. The ones that don't have weapons have no means of protection. And I'm concerned as far as the children of the Silver Falls School District. I have a neighbor right over in back of me. You probably know him. He's probably in a relationship with Robert Stadley. He has 3 children in Evergreen School. I'm Uncle Don to them. And I'm concerned for their safety, as well as all the different schools that we have in the Silver Falls School District. But I don't know whether you will change the policy or whether it can be changed. But if it comes to the point where they could change it and a principal or a teacher couldn't afford it, I'd be willing to buy the weapon for that teacher or principal. So I don't know how the things will change over a period of time or whether we can change the policy. I said I would even volunteer as an armed guard myself, since I've had the training in it, military training, and I'm sure there's other military people retired in this area that would probably be willing to volunteer. I'm a volunteer driver for Silverton Hospital Caravan. I've been doing that for 8 years. There's all kinds of volunteers. Even in our schools, don't we have teacher assistants that volunteers? Why can't we have volunteer armed guards? You know, you have to clear them, you have to get background checks. We had it when I applied for driving a school bus. They're all cleared by the police department for background checks. I'd be willing to volunteer as much time as necessary to be an armed guard at Evergreen or Victor Point or any other school here. But again, that's a matter of policy. And again, the liability, the insurance, all that is consideration. But I think you should look at it very realistically. That what happened in Noontown could happen here, God forbid, but we should be ready for it. I know you got the Silverton Police Department, you've got the Marion County Sheriff, but response time from them is anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes. All I'm saying is I'm willing to put money into it and put my own time into it. And I think there's a lot of other people in this area that would be willing to. That's all I have to say. Thank you for hearing me.
Great. Any questions for Don?
I just want to say thank you. I appreciate your comments, and I also really appreciate your willingness to offer both your time and money. So I think we should really consider how we can use volunteers to increase the safety of our schools if possible.
Yeah, I want to thank you for your comments also and for your willingness to
I'm available.
Financial resources.
Give me a call.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Maybe,
Thank you.
maybe that's something else we're going to put on our agenda to consider.
Yeah.
Would anyone else like to address the board tonight? Okay, moving on, we have one action item, the proposal to approve the required personal finance course at Silverton High School, including an additional half-hour credit for graduation requirement, moving the total credits to 25 and a half, effective the 2013-14 school year. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I would move for approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Julie got it first. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Okay, and no other business tonight. We're adjourned. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.